Hello and welcome to another edition of the Leader Campus Voices. My name is Mel Woodworth, and with me is Okey Enyia. And Okey is a member of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and he describes himself as let's see, I just misplaced it now. Um, a person who is a expert in the field of health and human services, is also an activist, and I think I remember that. Yeah, a thought scholar, or a scholar and activist, a thought leader, a political strategist, a mentor, and a health policy advisor. And so let's start right out. Thank you, first of all, for being with me. Okay, I appreciate it greatly.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, the first question then is, the health and human services have been in the news lately. Um, what do you think is currently the image of the health and human services to the people of the United States right now?
Yeah, so with right now, as you may know, the most pressing issue has to do with the undocumented children and immigrants. That the Secretary Alex Azar, has been tasked with coordinating and addressing. And so, in the eyes of some in the general public, certainly more could be done. And it's a very challenging time right now with how to best address this particular burning issue. And so the public perception, it can vary, right? It would depend on which way you lean politically. It obviously would depend on your background and just kind of how you think and feel about the undocumented population that is here, and how to best address the issue. So I would say that it wouldn't necessarily be, at least in my estimation, the most positive light right now. This is a new challenge, because while HHS does have kind of a framework and an office to address this type of challenge, the magnitude of it, I think we weren't necessarily prepared for, and then just all of the nuances of, of politics and what this means across government and things of that nature. It's a very challenging time right now.
You're say you're a scholar and activist. What are your most pressing activistic things, if I can put it in that kind of manner?
Yeah, so right now, because I am involved in policy and politics, part of my passion is, at least right now, is to encourage that everyone that can vote will vote come this November with the midterm elections. That's very important. I'm involved in the community in various ways, and one of which is to educate and to raise awareness about the importance of your vote being your voice, and to address voter apathy, and how do you create ways in which we can ensure that we get everyone that can vote to the polls. And again, whether you lean right or left, I think the more important thing is that you get out to vote and have your voice heard. So that's been part of my efforts. In fact, over the past several months, I mean, I've always been active on the ground. So, but because we are at a certain place in our nation's history, as it relates to the midterm elections and the implications, but also just voting locally. I have a passion for ensuring that we vote up and down the ballot, and so I'm tied into networks and to organizations that that work to educate and to really encourage people to get out the vote up and down the ballot.
You're also a political strategist, as it says, so let's combine the two.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best political strategy for either the Republican Party or the Democratic Party? If you had to narrow it down into one issue, you might say, of the two parties, what's their best strategies? Don't mean to stump you.
Right, no, it's because this is good because this allows one to balance both perspectives, and it's important to have a balanced perspective, about the nature of our democracy. So I think both parties obviously have a different approach when it comes to messaging is very important, and the topics that are articulated and are put on platforms, again, up and down the ballot. I think both parties, I think when it comes to particular topics, the economy and/or jobs is definitely at the top of the list. You can also say healthcare. I think on the left, healthcare would, I think, tend to be a little bit higher on the list than it would be on the right. And I think part of it is because as we are, kind of coming up to on the run up to the midterms and also 2020 presidential elections, the Democrats, that will certainly be top of mind because several of the presidential contenders on the left have or are going to make healthcare one of their top priorities. So with the Medicare for All or the single payer, platforms, those certainly will be parts of the presidential platforms on the left. But for the midterms to step back, it will certainly be a litmus test for the Democrats to kind of test the messaging, test the strategy, the approach, kind of see how things pan out. And then when we talk about, flipping the House blue, just as an example, that has its own unique challenge. And so the question becomes, what particular topics or issue areas do the Democrats, for example, want to really push forward and kind of put teeth to? And then on the right, it tends to be they're more conservative. They want to shrink governments. In my estimation, I think that those on the right tend to do a little bit of a better job of messaging and really having a consistent message that resonates with their base. And those on the right just tend to be very good at that. I think that they tend to vocalize an economic and jobs message that really does a better job of uniting those on the right. And I think on the left, that's going to be a challenge. And also on the left, just kind of reaching out in meaningful ways to minorities of voters or to women. That also has tended to be a challenge for those on the left. And so, I haven't had a chance to read the morning news today as of yet to get the current kind of state of play. But just off top, those are things or topics that I certainly will be top of mind, both on the right and the left, as we kind of navigate the run up to the midterms and then look ahead to 2020.
As a political strategist, then and the Health and Human Services, do you think that the healthcare aspect resonates well with the United States citizens?
So the Affordable Care Act is the current law of the land, and what has been happening is that with the current administration, they've made efforts um, to dismantle the ACA, right? Whether that's in terms of the actual law and certain provisions, or from a regulatory standpoint, really trying to make it more of a challenge for the various elements of the ACA to work, and so while the current conversation isn't necessarily around dismantling the ACA, it certainly will be a flashpoint as we approach the midterms, and certainly as we approach 2020. So right now, the focus with at HHS, as far as what's going on in the media, just kind of what's in play, is the undocumented
Mm-hmm.
Immigrants, and that obviously is a flashpoint. But that is, aside from the 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 wildfires in California, aside from some of the other issues that are going on in terms of natural disasters and things of that sort, which I've actually helped to move the ball as it relates to last season's hurricanes, and it's been projected that this season is going to be more intense as it relates to the hurricanes, that will be coming down the pike. So again, the current kind of media blitz, what's in motion is the undocumented immigrants, and the folks at the highest levels, as well as on the ground. They're doing all that they can to address the issue in the best ways that they know how. So,
Is this HHA in any kind of way, and I'm not certain of this, but any kind of way is associated with the CDC?
yes. So the CDC is part of HHS. So
Okay.
the CDC is one of, I guess, the divisions of HHS. Yeah. So there's they work together. So they work, ideally in tandem.
Yeah.
The CDC has its own unique niche within HHS.
Well, then I got twofold questions to some extent. Then, one, you mentioned about the hurricanes. Do you
Right.
think that HHA will be better prepared this year for those hurricanes, because they really got hit last year, and it was and it was so many in a row as well?
Yeah.
And then secondly, is there a movement toward these viruses that are uh, uh, how can I say it, are immune to the kind of cure that we usually have, the pills? Those two go hand in hand to some extent, because the bad water or Ebola or something can break out, and we got that kind of problem. So, in a twofold question, more prepared for the hurricanes, and what's the preparation for the viruses?
Sure. So yeah, so with the hurricanes, and I mean, literally, I was involved, at least on the ground in the policy shop last fall, when they were asking for volunteers to kind of man the Secretary's Operating Center, or they deployed um, Health Commission officers, to help out on the ground. So I work in the policy shop that reports directly to the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response. So with all of the lessons learned from last season, with the hearings that my boss sat in on and was a witness, and he gave updates to members of Congress about what happened and how things went, how his office addressed the issue, because you know it actually so my boss did a good job, because he actually was confirmed literally about maybe a month before Hurricane Harvey hit, and so he was coming into it like full speed, like he just had to handle it, and so because we fortunately had someone in place whose job was literally to coordinate addressing the response and recovery efforts, he did well. He did well to galvanize, those on the ground to really mount a response that I think was helpful. Now, of course, could things have been done differently or better? Yes. I mean, but I think by and large, considering the fact that he was literally just confirmed about a month before the first hurricane hit, and then to have Irma hit, and then to have Maria hit, and then to have Jose, and so the back-to-back, I think by and large, we did a decent job. Now, on the back end, with just kind of what things we could have done differently, yes. I think that when we talk about Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, yes. I mean, there's still a lot of work that's being done. There's still some of my colleagues that I know that I work closely with are still down there, now.
Oh, wow.
And, and they report back. And so it's still a challenge because, just in the spirit of transparency, when we talk about vulnerable populations who tend to be children, the elderly, persons with disabilities, people of color, who tend to be more challenged with living in places that don't necessarily have the best infrastructure in place, to handle these types of disasters. Those are the people that tend to be most affected. And as a scholar activist, as a person of color, as a person with a passion for social justice, this definitely is my passion, and part of my job and role was and continues to be amplifying these issues around how do you best prepare and support vulnerable populations when it comes to these types of challenges. To your second question, yes, same with Ebola, with Zika, my boss and his colleagues as well at BARDA, they sat, they were witnesses at hearings for the past, several months to update members of Congress and their staff about, what is currently being done to either make vaccines, or kind of what are the medical countermeasures that are being created? What's currently being done to build out an enterprise that will meaningfully address the issues as it relates to different types of viruses that are out there. And so, in fact, there was a hearing maybe 2 weeks ago where, but I think it was more focused on HIV. But kind of again, what lessons were learned from Ebola in 2014? Because in fact, I was on a House side as a staffer when Ebola was at its peak in 2014, and I actually helped to draft letters to the Appropriations Committee to garner funding to support efforts to address the epidemic at that time. So again, I saw firsthand, I was there, trying to help to move things along to get the funding for that. And also kind of going back to the hurricanes piece, the wonderful support in terms of funding to address the hurricanes was phenomenal. I think, that was an enriching bipartisan effort that I was pleased to see to address the, that particular challenge as it relates to the hurricane. So the hope and the idea is that, when it comes to man-made disasters, emerging threats, natural disasters, that there is a meaningful bipartisan effort to really take care of people. And I think that's one thing that I can take away from working at HHS is there is a willingness, to serve and to ensure that people of all backgrounds are given the help and the support that they need.
Well, I think that with someone like you in HHS, we can be satisfied that there are people that are really thoughtful and working hard. So, okay, I thank you very much for your time. And I always give people at the end of the interview a chance to plug something that they would like to plug. So I know you haven't got a book or anything like that. At least I don't know. I'm physically, but I don't know if you have a book or anything. But is there something you wish to plug in this last few minutes?
Sure. So thank you for having me. And yes, I do happen to be writing my first book.
Oh, wow,
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah, and so I plan on launching it at some point this fall. It's basically my life story up until this point, from childhood, college, grad school, med school, Capitol Hill. Entrepreneurship is a very transparent read, and it's basically just my life story. And I cover a wide range of issue areas around healthcare, health equity, health disparities, mental health and well-being, the school to prison pipeline, staff diversity on Capitol Hill. I cover a wide range of issue areas, and I talk about my background, my story. You can find me on social media as I'm also a founder and CEO of a consulting firm that I'm going to leverage the book to build out my business. And so my website, which will be coming up soon, is Enyia Strategies, but you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Periscope at Enyia Strategies. That's ENYIA Strategies. And then, of course, you can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook as my name, Okey dot Enyia, that's ENYIA. And so I look forward, and I'm excited about this first book. I'm hoping to launch it around October-ish. I want to get the pre-sales up and running very soon. And this will be the start of my author entrepreneurship career. And, I'm excited to really kind of serve as a resource, on a global scale as it relates to what I've learned, in my life so far.
Oh, that's fantastic. So please, when you get ready to launch it, send me an email, and I will put it on the LinkedIn group so that we know that it's there and available for people. And maybe we can talk to you sometime at the end of the year after you've made the launch and see what things have occurred at that time, and if you're still with HHS or not, and what aspects of health and human services, and also aspects of the political realm. It's been so nice talking with you, AK. So take care very much. Okay, Enyia, and like I say, we'll hopefully see you again sometime.
Likewise, thank you so much.